Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, college football fans across the nation and around the world. This is Tim May with the Tim May Show. I've got an interesting show, in my opinion, this week. Been recorded at different times, but I've got an interview with Ross Bjork, the new athletic director at Ohio State. He seems like he's been here for a year or so, but he really just officially kind of started about a month or so ago. And then I've got the guy that was in a lot of people's minds, the favorite to be the next athletic director of Ohio State, Pat Chun, who in the interim, after Ross Bjork was named, suddenly Pat Chun moved from Washington State to Washington. So Pat Chun, a former associate athletic director at Ohio State, is in the Big Ten. So things worked out pretty well for him too. And like I said, he was in essence my favorite to be the next athletic director at Ohio State based on his background, where he'd been, the ladder he'd climbed. But it's funny how things worked out for both of these guys. Ross Bjork coming from Texas A&M, and he and I get into a little bit of that, but mainly what it's been like to be the new athletic director at Ohio State, just the massive athletic department that the Ohio State has. I mean, look at it. I mean, Texas A&M's got what, 21 varsity sports. Ohio State has 36. And in this new realm now, headed toward revenue sharing, the challenges both of these guys are facing when it comes to maintaining their athletic departments while also sharing a major portion of the revenue with student athletes, primarily football, men's basketball, and women's basketball. It's going to be a new game here in a year or so. Of course, pending some of these things being challenged in court. But without further ado, and I'm not going to talk about the Michigan thing now because Michigan supposedly is getting or has gotten its notice of allegations. That's just another step along the way before penalties possibly could come down for the University of Michigan. It is what it is, and we went through this a lot over the last year. Connor Stallion's situation, that was in essence blatantly breaking a rule in the NCAA that forbids advanced scouting, personal advanced scouting of opponents. It's going to come home to roost. One of the main things the NCAA gets upset about is when you don't cooperate in investigations. That's really, they don't have subpoena power, but they can rule you ineligible to be part of any NCAA contest or any NCAA actions. Connor Stallions has moved on. The troubling part is what this might mean for a new Michigan head coach, Sharon Moore. Based on the reports, he's pretty well mentioned in the notice of allegations. We'll see where that goes. We'll see when everything comes public. But the bottom line is, it's not like last year. The grand jury, or no, what do you call it? The grand jury, the prosecutor has caught up with Michigan. We'll see where it goes. But let's get first to my conversation with Ross Bjork. Hey, Ross Bjork, man, finally, welcome to the Tim May Show. It's good to have you.
Appreciate it. I've listened to you a couple times, so it's good to be on the show, and thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, man.
Happy New Year.
Oh, same to you.
That's what I call this.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's funny because you spent about, 4 or 5 years in Texas. I spent 11. I feel like I'm a Texan.
Yep.
Grew up in Alabama and then Texas. You've been all over the place too and stuff, but how much more do you feel like an Ohioan than you do? I mean, I know about your background with your family and stuff, but
yeah.
How much more of an Ohioan do you feel than from 4 or 5 weeks ago or 4 or 5 months ago?
Yeah, well, it's been a great transition to get here really the 1st of March, to overlap with Gene, to kind of really have that gift of learning from him and just watching how he operates. And obviously I've been an AD for a while now, so I know the sort of the fundamentals of it, but every place is different, every place is unique.
Yeah.
But having the personal connections with my family, I mean, coming to the state of Ohio for all 51 years of my life,
yeah.
So it just feels natural. And somebody introduced me the other day and they said, boy, it feels like Ross has been here a long time. And so in some ways that's a good thing. I think that's a compliment.
Yeah.
But also I'm the new guy, so I'm still learning a ton. But that ramp up period, the familiarity, the family ties, it really feels natural for Sonia and I. Our youngest Paxton, he's already got buddies that he's already running around with. So, we just try to be ourselves and try to blend in and fit in. but also understand that there's a lot to learn because it's a big place. So
Yeah.
it's been awesome the way we've transitioned.
Hey, one quickie here is y'all drove up. I remember you texting a little photo. That was pretty cool on Twitter of y'all in the car, loaded up. I think you had your dog with you.
Yeah, and it was just me. It wasn't.
Yes.
It wasn't we.
Yes, right.
Sonia and Paxton, they wanted to fly.
Of course.
I had to drive our car, and then the two dogs. It was like, okay, who's gonna? And I said, I got it.
Yeah.
I'll do my duty as a dad, and we,
Yeah.
we love our dogs, and we love dogs in general. And so
Yeah.
that was a fun trip.
Heck yeah.
They kept me on my toes.
But I was going to ask you, did you make one last stop at Bucky's in Madisonville or something? You understand what I'm saying?
Right.
There are things you're leaving behind.
You know what? There was the way I went. There was a Bucky's, but the timing of the dogs,
Exactly.
the timing of my bladder and their bladder,
Exactly.
didn't match up with Bucky's. I'll get back to Bucky's at some point in time in my
Yeah,
travels.
there's going to be one over by Dayton here pretty soon, so
right.
you and I both can fuel up. I mean, ever since I discovered Bucky's a couple of years ago, I just go, why wouldn't this surround in my lifetime? But what I want to get to here, was that the moment when you had all that time to think? You're sitting in the car, you're probably on the phone, Bluetooth, of course,
Bluetooth,
as you're driving. But boy, this is real. This has happened, and you know what I mean? Because you still had goodbyes back in Texas A&M, and that's still no matter how many years, it's still a big chunk out of your life. But did you feel more than anything when you crossed the Mississippi River? Hey, you know.
Yeah, you
You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I totally get it, and I think that's the fascinating thing about these type of transitions, or just life in general, or just leadership lessons. I think we're always in such a hurry, and we never get time to sort of look out the window, if you will. And so, that perhaps that drive, I was looking out the window for 16, 17 hours, with two dogs that I'm trying to manage, and they're going crazy. But you're exactly right. That trip for sure, because again, I was by myself here for 4 months without the family. I was in a temporary apartment, right? And you're just on the run the whole time. And then, okay, now it's real. You're moving here, your family's here, you're bringing your dogs, you're driving across the country. And so, yes, there was a lot of reflective time. There was a lot of just turn the radio off, no cell phone, and just drive. And I love to drive in general. I think it's just sort of peaceful. And so you're right. When I was crossing, whether it's the Mississippi, we spent time in Kentucky. So drove through Bowling Green, Kentucky. That's where our youngest son was born.
Wow.
Kind of pulled over and said, okay, put him on FaceTime, and and then stayed the night, in Kentucky to make it a short trip. So yeah, it was a reflective moment to say, okay, this is it. This is all sinking in. This is your opportunity to lead a great place, an unbelievable organization at a flagship university, and really a crown jewel in higher education and college athletics. So just very humbled and very honored to be here at Ohio State.
But you know what, I wanted to ask you as an athletic director, do you feel like over the last several years now too, almost like a pack mule? I mean, things just keep getting loaded up on you. I'm talking about from the changes in NIL, transfer portal, the NCAA, going to revenue sharing next year if they get there, unless a court case stops it. You know where I'm going.
Oh, yeah.
I think the people are really going to revenue share in this whole thing are the attorneys and lawyers.
Yeah.
But does it just feel like every time you turn around, to use a moving analogy, there's something new in the trunk.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, has it been really strange?
Yeah. When I was in college, I was player of the week at Emporia State, and we were at this quarterback club meeting, and they asked all of us, hey, what do you want to do when you grow up? And the athletic director at the time was sitting in the room, and I said, I want his job. I want his job. I want to be an AD someday.
Yeah.
I was 20 years old, and I thought it was about dealing with coaches, hiring the right people, balancing the budget, being visible in the community, building buildings. And then when I got to Missouri, that was sort of my first big time job at a big place. Those were the fundamentals.
Yeah.
Now we have to do that, because those are the fundamentals, and we have to do all the new stuff. Legislative, congressional activity. I mean, we're essentially lobbyists now for federal legislation, for state legislation. Now we're going to be dealing with salary caps that we've never had to deal with. We're going to be dealing with valuation, if you will, on roster positions. And then we have the NIL bucket. So in some ways, you almost need two athletic directors. One to deal with the basics. We want to win.
Yeah.
We want to have nice buildings. We want to hire the right coaches. You have to do that too. And you have all the legislative stuff and all the sort of new things that are coming our way. So there's a lot to it. We're not just traditional athletic administrators anymore. We have to be kind of all things. We have to be a generalist in every area, while also understanding enough about the specialty of it to be really good.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot to it. You have to have great people. You have to hire the right coaches. You have to have coaches that think like a CEO. We have that in Coach Day. We have that in Jake Diebler, Kevin McGuff. I could go down the list, Ty Tucker. You have to have coaches that are willing to adapt to make sure that they can execute all this stuff. Because I can't do it alone, for sure.
Yeah.
So it is fascinating, the evolution in the last 5 years, 10 years, 30 years that I've been around all of this, to say, okay, this is what we have to do. And if we don't do it, you get trucked.
Yes.
You get overrun. And so you better be at the top of this. And obviously here at Ohio State, we have the ability, the wherewithal to do all of that. So it's awesome that we get to do this. But there's a lot to it, to your point.
President Ted Carter, I talked to him as he walked off the field yesterday.
Yeah.
He came over and spoke to the team, and of course he always has somebody saying, "Hey, you got to be here now."
Right,
So that was a
right,
very
right,
brief
right.
moment, but he got far enough into it to say about what a great job he believes you are doing. In essence,
Yeah.
he's saying, pretty much, he's saying he thinks you're the right guy, right time for this athletic director job, this next step,
Yeah,
this inflection
yeah,
point,
yeah.
really, for college. Without gloating or boasting, do you feel like the things you've been through have put you in a position? Y'all were right at the forefront when NIL came up
Yeah.
at Texas A&M. Caught a lot of grief about it,
Right,
but
right,
y'all just
right.
believe me. I grew up in East Texas. I know what Texas A&M people are. Right? They mobilize.
They mobilize.
Yeah,
They care.
but-
They care. That's
But do
right.
you feel like you are
Yeah.
sort of right man, right time at least?
I mean,
I know it'd be.
look, I guess that'll to be determined,
Yeah.
if you will, right? I mean, there's a lot to do, and I think in this context, I do think I have a great perspective. I played Division II football. We had nothing, right? And then I saw the evolution in the late 90s around the arms race in college athletics, where you could focus on those fundamentals. And then I was an athletic director at 37 years old at Western Kentucky, and so I was the youngest FBS AD at the time. And then I got to Ole Miss, and I was the youngest Power 5 AD when we had 5 conferences. Now we only have 4.
Yeah.
And so I think I have a good perspective of, I saw it at a different era. I saw it when it was growing, evolving. I saw it as an AD. I remember when we put in cost of attendance, and everybody thought, oh my God, this is going to bankrupt the enterprise.
Yeah.
We're still here.
Yeah.
So and then I think I have enough energy to carry into this new era as things are changing, and then be innovative. And I think my experience at A&M, we were innovative. Whether people like that or not, whether things were accurate or not, it doesn't matter. We were innovative. We were able to push. I think that's what Ted Carter was looking for in a new athletic director, was to say, okay, how do we honor tradition but not think traditionally? And I think I bring some perspective like that, and then hopefully I still have the wherewithal, the energy, the passion, which I do. I love what we do, and now we get to execute on that. And so I think it's just a combination of a lot of different things.
Yeah, and you do feel a responsibility both for the wherewithal of the program, but also a responsibility to do the right thing for the programs.
Right.
There's, as you've pointed out many times, I've had you on video many times, or several times, let's put it that way,
Yep.
the cutting that's coming in one form or fashion for these programs to keep, to
Right.
basically make sure football, the big time revenue
Right.
programs are taken care of, because without the money coming in the front door, there is no back room, right?
Right.
I mean,
Right.
is that weighing on you a lot right now?
Yeah.
What the
Yeah,
cuts that may be coming?
Right, that's right. It's really, the way I look at it is it's a recalibration of everything.
Yeah.
We have revenues over here, and we generate a lot of money, and we'll continue to generate a lot of money. We want to be the first athletic department that has a $300 million operating budget. Not just a one-time event, but an operating budget. So generate a lot of money, but we have to recalibrate our expenses. We can't spend money the same way. that part's going to be the hard part.
Yeah.
We can be exciting over here in the revenue bucket, but the expense bucket, and so, yeah, it does weigh on you to say, how do we maintain this same experience for our athletes? Because they're number one, they're the most important thing that we do. How do we make sure that we can be competitive? But we may have to redefine that. Gene talked about that in his last couple interviews, right?
Yeah.
We may have to redefine what competitiveness means.
Yeah.
And that may be hard for people to hear that, but the resources may speak to competitiveness, right? And then, look, leaning in on football. It's been that way for years here at Ohio State. We built Ohio Stadium when everybody thought, why are they building a 65,000 seat stadium in 1922? They're crazy.
Shaped like a horseshoe.
Yeah, shaped like a horseshoe, right? Coach Day described it as maybe it's a magnet, right, to draw people in.
Yeah, that was a great line.
Right, and so, right, there's always been football here at Ohio State. There's always going to continue to be football. That's the economic driver. So in some ways in this whole conversation, we've always sort of talked about commercial activity, and we've kind of tucked it away and said, hey, it's about education, which it will continue to be, but now we can actually talk about commercial activity.
Yeah.
Because the athletes will now benefit from that in a much greater way. We should have done it a long time ago. We all admit that. But now we're here. So how do we have education at the centerpiece? How do we have commercial activity in a much more highlighted way? How do we recalibrate the way we spend money? Those are all the things that we're mapping out right now. And so it weighs on you from the standpoint of you don't want to impact people's lives.
Mm-hmm.
But part of that equation is spending. Part of that equation is expense allocation, and that's what we're working on right now. So there's a lot to do, but we have to do it. We have to recalibrate. It may be uncomfortable, but we have to get used to that.
Yeah.
And we have to get used to things being different and may look different while still maintaining the tradition and the elements that make this place special. It just may look different.
Yeah.
It may feel different, and we've got to just make sure we transparently communicate.
I think you told Sports Illustrated Russ Dellinger that I think the estimate was something like 20 million on this football team from an NIL standpoint. I think that was a number you threw out there.
Yeah.
Was that accurate? I mean, you know.
Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of sort of numbers out there.
Who knows?
But yeah, approximately is what I said. And so, and look, we're not shying away from the fact that Ohio State's in a great ecosystem. Our community supports it. Before I got here, Coach Day and Gene said, look, we've got to be all in. They activated a lot of the relationships that are built in.
Yeah.
And so we don't want to shy away from it. People get fixated on a number.
Of course they do.
Right? And so that really doesn't mean anything other than there is a lot of support here. Right? I've described this as a public trust of the state of Ohio. People care. They want to see us be successful. That pathway in the off season was the way to support, right, in an NIL ecosystem that is a third-party ecosystem. And so we went all in. And so the unique thing about Columbus is the commercial activity around here. It is really true NIL. We have Weber Grill, we have Chipotle, right? We have Express, we have limited brands. I mean, we have brands that are activating in a very unique way with our athletes that other communities can't do. And so the lift on that creates a greater support system. So it's really fascinating as we move into this sort of the next evolution of this.
Yeah, and everybody thinks money corrupts, right? And whatever. I'm telling you, I've been covering this team. It's going on my 41st season. I don't know if I've seen a team that's closer than this team is that seems to give a damn about being the best, not just being the best paid, meaning being the best. I don't know if you've been around. Yeah, you've been around them a lot. Do you sense the same thing about this football team? This is it almost feels like a moment in time with the guys who came back, the guys who are bubbling up, the guys who have returned, the transfer portal dudes who have sprinkled in exactly the right spots, and then the incoming class, which is loaded.
Yeah.
Does it feel like almost a moment in time, or is just in some respects every football team is different from one year to the next? But is this sort of sustainable from your vantage point?
Yeah. Look, the first time I met Coach Day was on January 15th. And it was when I was here in town as everything was unfolding for our announcement.
Yeah.
And I asked him, I said, well, hey, Coach, what are you focused on? And he said, culture, leadership, got to hire an OC, right? That
Yeah.
was during that time.
Yes.
And we went over some names that he was considering, and obviously hired Bill O'Brien, and then obviously the chip thing, flipped and came back around.
Funny how
And so-
serendipity happens, right?
Right,
But go
and
ahead.
then he said, we're gonna have guys that return that people may not expect. And so that's gonna be the foundation. And then the transfer portal world was active, at that time, and some guys I think had already committed at that time. But the fact that he mentioned culture and leadership, the first two things, and then when I sat down with him when I got here in town, Coach, what's the program identity? Because I wanna learn that, right?
Yeah.
Elite. So focusing on culture, chemistry, I think those are going to be the difference makers. People are going to have talent, and a lot of people have talent. There's great players everywhere. People are going to have NIL money, and there's a lot of people doing great things out there in that space. The teams that have chemistry and culture and leadership, and really, we're sitting here, culture is fight, right? And he wears that on his sleeve. He makes sure the players in this team room understand that. So the fact that he's focusing on those things, while also saying, we got a pretty good team, and the team has bought into that, that's where we feel this vibe.
Yeah.
Now, we have to execute. There's going to be a tough moment, right? It's easy when everything's kind of fun and active. Okay, what happens the first time we kind of get hit in the mouth? How do we react to that?
Yeah.
But if you're built on a foundation, those are the teams that thrive. And so I've seen it. It's exciting. Now we want to see it translate to the field and on Saturday, and that's what we're all excited about for this season.
Yeah, and your background, we've just talked about that a minute ago, but when you see something like you experienced, the other flip side is Jimbo Fisher, y'all gave him the big contract, everybody's
We can talk about that.
No,
Right,
here's what I want to talk about though.
Right.
But then it didn't work out.
Right.
You understand, everything's a little bit of a crapshoot, isn't it? When you hire people and then you have a great season, you think things are in place, and then it goes belly, not belly up necessarily, but tipsy-tory.
Yeah.
No,
I know what you're saying. Yeah, and I think it goes
and then
back.
then it brings hard decisions, right? Go ahead.
That's right. Look, it goes down to, it all rests on culture.
Yeah.
It rises and falls on leadership. And look, when we made that decision at my previous institution, I went through a lot of things. I was very direct on why I thought it didn't work. And it was basically all the things I just mentioned.
Yeah.
About leadership and culture. Every decision you make or don't make, and it's a lot of times it's the ones you don't make because you think, hey, I'll just kind of let that sit there. I'm not going to deal with it because I don't want to get messy, or I don't want to have controversy, or
Yeah.
I'm
having a good day. Yeah.
Yeah. If you don't make that decision, that has a bigger impact perhaps if you made another decision, right?
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
so I've seen it both ways where it can crumble, and that's where, look, it's all about the institution first, and that's when I make decisions, what's best for the institution, what's the right values, doing the right thing, always will come into play. And so as I see this team and as I see Coach Day lead, having the foundation of a culture and a structure, he has a coach's manual for a purpose, right?
Yeah.
He wants to be intentional about how the coaches act with the players and how they speak to them. And so all those things come into play around leadership, and that's what I've really, really been impressed with.
Yeah. Last thing, 18 teams in the Big Ten. I still contend that down the road, Notre Dame and North Carolina will be in the Big Ten. I've been telling people that forever. For a couple of years now. Is 18 unwieldy? Is 18 unwieldy based on where the 18 are? But I got a sense over at Indianapolis at Media Days a couple of weeks ago, or last week really, that, man, it's kind of cool. You're sitting there, you're talking to Dan Lanning from Oregon. I'm sitting there talking to Lincoln Riley, speaking on the hot seat, Lincoln Riley from USC, and I'm just going, really, this is pretty cool, because I'm not going to name names of other schools in the Big Ten that traditionally I've talked to, and I'd go, they don't have a chance. Why am I even, you're still what I'm saying. I think there is for one of another term, a new excitement about this league based on the way it has expanded, but who it added.
Yeah, that commercial, the Big Ten commercial, where they show the map and all the teams kind of pop up, sort of this virtual. They showed us the new commercial yesterday with Washington, Oregon, USC, and UCLA. And then all of a sudden you fly over to Nebraska as the first team that pops up, and then it goes to the East Coast. Yeah. And it was like, okay, that's pretty cool. So I think from a from a market-based, from a TV value, from an economic ecosystem, it's not unwieldy. It was the right decision to get into markets that have a lift for the rest of us,
Yeah.
right? And a lot of times in these decisions now, that's what's leading it, right? Is how do we drive more value for our media rights? And again, now we can talk about that, right? Because there is commercial activity. You know, look, I think the things that will get tricky that we have to continue to watch and manage is how we schedule. How are we traveling out to the West Coast? Those West Coast teams, when they travel east, how do they manage that? They're going to be traveling east a lot more than we're traveling west.
Correct. That's what people forgot about.
So,
You know,
yeah. Football's pretty easy. That's you're just doing that, one trip. Basketball, volleyball, tennis, baseball, softball, soccer, those are the things that I think that's where people say, okay, now we're spread out, right? And what does that look like, long term? Look, there's going to continue to be market corrections and market shifts in college athletics. There's a reason why TV contracts have terms on them, right? Because things can change, right? So all of us are monitoring the ACC. All of us are going to monitor what happens in the late 2020s, early 2030s, because contracts expire and contracts run out. So when you either renew those contracts or let them expire, do other things start to shift? There's a reason why the Big Ten and the SEC are now coalescing around a lot of these initiatives, right? We have the biggest brands, we have the biggest TV value. What does that mean in the future? We can't predict it, but I think like-minded institutions have to stick together. Big brands have to stick together as this ecosystem evolves. There's a lot of work to do on the governance front at the NCAA. This is not really what you asked, but it all ties together.
Yeah.
The governance front has to be redefined in terms of what does Division I mean? What does FBS mean? So all of these things have to come into play, and it goes to, we base that on conference affiliation. And maybe it's not, maybe we're still in the same conference, but our affiliation, our economics, those are the things that all get sort of consolidated down the road. And so I think that part will be fascinating as we get into the next 10 to 15 years.
Yeah. Last thing. Well, I know, but I'm famous for asking
Yes,
three
sir.
last questions. But I'm just
Okay.
going to ask one.
Just one more last one.
Is revenue sharing going to work in your opinion? Is it, or is it going to lead to another sort of major change? You understand what I'm saying? In the structure of things.
One, it gives us clarity. And the way the settlement works, and this is all court-led, right? We've never been governed by a court case,
Right.
We had Title IX, but that was federal legislation, right? We had the 1983 Supreme Court case on deregulating TV, which led to economics going up.
Yeah.
So now we have a court case that mandates how we operate. So it gives us clarity, it gives us structure. There's still a lot of details to work out. So the other thing about it, it's a 10-year period, to my point.
Yeah.
So it gives us clarity. So I believe, yes, it will work. There's still things to work out. There's going to be a structure around it. But the clarity piece was the biggest thing. We can't keep getting sued every time we do something.
Right.
Will this lead to more lawsuits? Maybe. Is it completely risk adverse? No. How do we put ourselves in the best possible position to be risk adverse? That's what I think this case does for us. So as we work out the details, there'll be a lot to share. There'll be a lot to map out. But I think the clarity piece, that's the part that's going to work. And I'm excited about it because it benefits the athletes, but it also gives our coaches a roadmap to say, okay, now you have something to point to versus sort of this haphazard system that we've been in. And so that's the part that excites me.
Yeah, it's been kind of like a little bit drifting in space, and all of a sudden there's a planet. You know what I mean?
And you don't know what everybody's doing, and now we at least have clarity around some numbers. And so those are the things I think we're all excited about.
Ross Bjork, thanks for joining the Tim May Show. We could talk on for like 45 or 55 hours, but
We got to get out to practice.
you have to go watch sports and stuff.
So do you. All right. Thanks, Tim.
Appreciate Ross Bjork sitting down with him there in the it was the Ohio State football team's meeting room, and we had a great discussion. As he and I talked about, we could have gone on for another 6 or 7 hours. Of course, I have time for that, but he doesn't. Running 36 sports, I joked around with him too. I mean, just figure if you spend a half an hour getting to know people in each sport, times 36. You know what? That's 18 hours you spend just getting to know people at a new place where you've taken over, and it's it's daunting in a way. But like he said, that's why you have other people working with you. Um, it's you want these opportunities for the student athletes. And to make that happen, you do have to have an army. What's going to be interesting to see is when cuts are made, how much of it could be on the administrative side of things, which obviously in the last 20 years in college athletics has blossomed, exploded really, the opportunities there. So we'll see where it all goes. And speaking of that, let's get to my conversation with Pat Chun I had during the Big Ten Media Days a couple of weeks ago over in Indianapolis. And I've known Pat Chun since he was about 21 years old, maybe before that. And like I said, and I told Ross this, that I had considered Pat Chun the favorite for that job. But you know, it's how things work out, man. And it's interesting because bringing in a Ross Bjork from out of town, so to speak, you know, Ted Carter, the new president at Ohio State, just thinks, as he said in an interview I had with him after the first Ohio State practice this season or this month, said, you know, he just thinks Ross was the right guy at the right time for the Ohio State job. And the thing about Pat is Pat does have personal ties back to Ohio State and with people who are still in the administration, people who are still coaching, et cetera. And you're not saying this because I think Pat Chun's a true professional, but sometimes it's easier to walk in where not everybody knows your name, so to speak, when it's time to make big decisions and possibly big cuts. And I think both of these guys, Ross Bjork and Pat Chun, ended up in situations that are the right place, right time for them, and also for their schools, their respective schools. So without further ado, let's get to my conversation with Pat Chun. Pat Chun, athletic director at Washington. Fancy meeting you here.
Yeah, where college football has taken the University of Washington is a whole new media day right here in Indianapolis. I guess we're one of 4 schools that can't just fly in and fly out in one day now.
Yeah, exactly. Where do you go through, Minneapolis? No, I'm just messing with you. But fancy meeting you here. The world of college athletics is taking you from Washington State to Washington.
Yeah.
And you know, you were my favorite to become the next athletic director at Ohio State. It didn't work out. The president went another direction. And immediately, all of a sudden, boom, there you are at Washington, and you're in the Big Ten anyway.
Yeah.
Just how ironic is that?
Yeah, my wife always reminds me, you know, where you're at is where you're supposed to be. And, you know, personally for my family, to stay in state, to move, you know, a drive away from where we used to live. You know, we have lifelong friends we've made in Seattle. So got reunited with Scotty Graham, who's on the football staff there. So, you know, it's nice being with at least staying in the same state. But really part of the draw for Washington with me was, you know, I grew up in this conference. You know, we're in Big Ten country in Seattle, but I did grow up in Big Ten country, in a state over in Ohio. So it's really been a pretty seamless fit. And, you know, today, you know, this media, you know, the media days here is probably a little bigger deal for the 4 schools coming in because, you know, the Big Ten is the Big Ten, and we're all, you know, proud members of the Big Ten now, and are excited for August 2nd to get here because that's our official first day in the Big Ten.
Isn't it amazing you're here early?
Yeah.
That's a good sign. That's a good sign of a new member. It is stunning, though, to think, let's think 8 years ago, who would have seen this coming, right?
Yeah.
I mean, correct?
Yeah.
Explain to people in a nutshell what has driven this from your vantage point.
Well, it's just
I'm talking about the 4 teams from the Pac-12 joining the Big Ten.
I think it's really the you know, and it's been well documented, but it's the mismanagement, the failed vision, and just how the Pac-12 just kind of frayed apart. Really starting a couple years ago with USC and UCLA leaving, but those the tip of the, like, I guess the boulder started going down here over a decade ago. You know, the failures with the Pac-12 network, the inability to see what was coming around the corner. TV has changed. You know, cable has changed. We're watching in real time how much dollars are getting poured into the NFL and NBA, and you know, in a college football standpoint, 2 conferences are probably going to see the lion's share of TV money. One is the Big Ten. So it's where the world's at, and Washington's one of the schools that we're proud to have always been on the upper part of college football, college athletics. We've been to 2 national championships, multiple CFP appearances. I think one of only 8 schools that had multiple CFP appearances. So this is where we want to be. This is the level that we've been accustomed to being at, and we're proud to be a Big Ten member because it's clearly one of 2 conferences at that level right now.
Hey, when you leave Washington State and go to Washington, is that like leaving Ohio State and going to Michigan, or vice versa? Or is it, do people understand? You understand what I'm saying?
It's one. There's in the odd role that's an athletic director, which you saw with Gene Smith. The pessimist in me is going to say you're just not going to see someone stay 19, 20 years at a school anymore.
Yeah.
To have that many presidents, one, it speaks to just the excellence and the person and the leader that Gene is. But with the constant churn of presidents, presidents typically like to bring their own athletic director in. The president at Washington State, who's a good of a boss I could have ever asked for, was very transparent with his timeline on how long when he was going to retire. And professionally, this was 6 years. We've done a lot of good things at Washington State, but it was time for us and our family to try something different. So I would probably argue it's painful. I understand the feelings of the Washington State folks, but it's probably more Michigan State to Michigan than it is Ohio State to Michigan. How about that?
That's an excellent analogy.
Yeah.
That's the way to put it. No wonder you got that job. Are we at this very moment, as you and I speak, there's a lot going on that's going to happen in a year. A lot has happened coming up to this year.
Yeah.
Are we in that small little pause between conference expansion and revenue sharing, which is coming next year, and the ramifications of rulings that are going to change scholarship numbers? Maybe some for the better, but a lot for the worse, maybe. Are we in that one little pause, and do you even have a chance to catch your breath?
Well, I would say it's a pause because it's going to be preparation time for whatever the new model is, and as that settlement agreement gets final, or hopefully gets finalized, that's going to be what the model will be on the go forward until it changes again. But it is significant change. This revenue share piece, the going from roster caps instead of scholarship minimums, it adheres to the NCAA. We've had a long history, or schools have had a long history of trying to fight antitrust. Well, this essentially, as we go forward in 2025 and beyond, we're going to share more revenue with our student athletes. I think we're all conscientious that there's going to be a segment of student athletes that are going to get more than they've ever got. And we're all trying to minimize the bucket of student athletes that nobody wants to say, hey, they're getting less than they used to get. So there's a lot of work and prep that has to go into it. There's a lot of understanding of the rules. And we're in a competitive environment. There's going to be a lot of people trying to figure out, what are the best way to maximize the rules to their own competitive advantages. And that's part of what college athletics is. So it's going to be a busy year relative to prep, or busy half a year, because, the reality is, this firsthand, recruiting never stops. So as the model changes, we're going to have to be able to, sooner than later, have young people know exactly what the new compensation package is going to be a member of X program at the University of Washington.
Yeah, that's crazy, isn't it? The way, for example, if football ends up with 105 roster limit or 120, I think the Big Ten or some members like Ryan Day was here the other day, and he was saying 120 seemed to be a really good number historically. But it looks more and more like maybe 105 for football. Does that mean 105 scholarships for football? You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, so I don't have, to my understanding, and this is someone who has not actually physically read the settlement agreement yet, but to my understanding, you can scholarship up to 105, but there's going to be a date, which has historically been, whether it's the first day of class, the first game, week of the first game, or to my understanding, the roster is going to have to be at 105. So what that actually means, I think that's where we all have to go get in a room and rethink what college sports is. And the nice thing is, we're one of 2 conferences that are going to have, the most influence on shaping governance policy and what this needs to look like, because we have to figure out how to come up with a more sustainable model. Is this the pathway to get there? It has to be, because we're going to keep evolving and changing, and until we get protections from Congress, we're always going to be pulled apart by television, by lawsuits, by legal action, and that's the oddity of college athletics.
I was going to say Title IX was a big deal when it started. I mean, I thought it was the right thing to do in many respects. Title IX is going to dictate interpretation of Title IX, how it now applies or will apply in the future. That is, equal opportunities for men and women. Can you even wrap your head around what it is until you get interpretations on that?
I think for us, it's to wrap our minds around what is the interpretation. And the nice thing is, we're in a conference, like one of the first questions I got at Washington is, how long is it going to take for Washington to be a Big Ten school? And I said, well, just walking around the campus in weekend one, when I see all these historic buildings, an incredible med school and medical program, a big athletic program, high research, top 25 ranking nationally as an institution, I said, this is a Big Ten school.
Great stadium.
Yeah, great stadium. So for us, it's, we're fortunate we're working with like-minded institutions to try to come up with solutions, and I think that's going to be really the advantage of being in the Big Ten is we have more, the reality is, it's, as painful it is for leaving the Pac-12, we actually have more in common with more of the institutions in the Big Ten.
Yeah.
And as we shape policy and what governance looks like, it's good to be with like-minded institutions.
Does it soften the blow to be coming in with 3 other former members of the Pac-12 from the standpoint of at least having a friend in the pool?
Well, it does, but I remind everyone, if and this is a biased take, the cream of the crop is going to the Big Ten.
Yes.
And so and you're joining, superpowers in college athletics.
Yeah.
So it just adds more to the competitive, because we're, prior to joining the Big Ten, we're competing tooth and nail with USC and Oregon for recruits, and you pick the sport. The West Coast, California is a critical land for recruiting for students and student athletes, and now we're in a league that it's coast to coast now. So it's good to have some familiar faces, but for me personally, it's good to come to media days and see some familiar faces like the legendary Tim May.
Yeah, there you go. Last thing, you've moved from Columbus to Florida Atlantic.
Yeah, Boca Raton.
To Pullman, Washington,
yeah.
to Seattle, on this trek you've been on. But how quickly did you and your wife find a house in Seattle?
We've actually found it within, the surprise was we sold our house in Pullman in a day. So it's a small college
Who knew
town.
Pullman was a hot real
I
market?
know, yeah. So that was a bigger shock. The real estate market in Seattle is wild.
Yes.
So and just because there's so many businesses, so many corporations, there Microsoft, Amazon, Costco, Starbucks, you name it. There's tons of global companies there. So, but we did find a house. It took us about 2 weeks. I had the fun of living in the house, an empty house by myself for about a month, and then once school ended in Pullman, the family drove over. So, like I said, it was an easy move for all of us.
Pat, have you been working nonstop since then? I mean, how would you describe when you take a new job like that? Like Ross Bjork is taking the job at Ohio State, and he was working before he was even really employed. You know what I mean? I mean, I would think you were doing the same thing. I mean, it's like, is it just one thing after the other now, or is it? How would you describe your work day?
Well, it's advice I took from Jim Tressel. And it's like when you join an organization, you got to earn your right to be a part of a team. So my focus has been making sure that everyone there knows that, hey, there's a lot of work that's been done here. There's a lot of work we have to go do together going forward, but we're not going to be able to do that if I don't earn my right to be a part of this team. So that has been my mindset. And I tell everyone, if it's moving boxes, taking out trash, going meet with donors, going to practice, whatever it is, I want to be a part of this team, and I'm going to go earn it every single day. So it's and you can't do these jobs without a supportive wife and kids that understand it. Especially in the beginning, it needs to be all consuming, but it's like it's done with purpose and a reason. So that's it's been so seamless to join this team. They've been very welcoming. It's we're ready to get to work and ready to attack the challenges of whatever this new model is.
Amen.
Yeah.
Pat Chun, thanks for joining the Tim May Show again.
Thank you.
Well, I appreciated Pat Chun standing up and talking with me for a little while. Like I said, he and I go way back, and I wish him the best of luck at the University of Washington, because both of these guys, Ross Bjork at Ohio State and Pat Chun at Washington, they're going to be putting in the hours, especially as this revenue sharing model comes into play starting next year, barring any kind of delays via the courts, etc. But I appreciated both of them joining me on this week's edition of the Tim May Show. And until next week, we'll see you then.